Hi, I'm Jarod Thomas. I'm coming to you from Ghana country in Adelaide. And I'm a Nukunu and Ngadjuri person from the Southern Flinders Ranges and mid-north of South Australia. And my mum's Aboriginal family is from Winton, Queensland. I'm an author and I'm a proud ambassador of the Indigenous Literacy Foundation. And I work as the Margaret and William Geary Curator of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art and material culture at the South Australian Museum. So today I'm going to speak to you about some of my books and my writing and the process that I apply when writing novels. So one of the main books that I'll speak about today is called Calypso Summer. And Calypso Summer was the 2013 winner of the State Library of Queensland Black and Write Award. So I'll speak about that book. One of my recent projects was the Game Day series, children's books that was co-written with basketballer Paddy Mills. I'm sure everyone knows Paddy Mills, plays for the San Antonio Spurs in America. He's also an Olympian, plays with the Boomers. His father's family is Torres Strait Islander and his mother is Curator from South Australia. So that was an incredible project released in 2017 by Allen and Unwin and recently released in America with publisher K. Miller. This is another children's book that I wrote for Oxford University Press. So this was released, I think, in about 2013. So I released in 2011. So yeah, I write across young adult fiction and also children for younger readers. Sorry, books for younger readers, younger children. This is a book that I helped with. It's written by the kids at Tiwi College. It's called Shallow in the Deep End. So the Tiwi Island kids wrote this book. I love it. It was written as one of the Indigenous Literacy Foundation projects, community literacy projects, where kids get to work with an author to develop work incorporating their own language and about themes that are really relevant to them. So yeah, it's a story that talks about life in the Tiwi Islands. About a little girl that wants a dog, and instead of getting a dog, her dad gives her a baby water buffalo and says that it's a dog. Songs That Sound Like Blood is another book that I have published with Magabala Books. So it was a follow-up to Calypso Summer. And I've also been published in various anthologies. So one of the most recent is Growing Up Aboriginal Australia, which is edited by Anita Heiss, the incredible Anita Heiss. And yeah, of course, it's about my life growing up in Port Augusta. So I'm going to speak for a while about how I wrote Calypso Summer, some of the thoughts behind the novel and the processes. And I guess the journey, which was a really incredible journey in writing this book. So basically, I started writing this book because I had a couple of concerns. And I think when you're writing, you've got to be passionate about what you're writing about. So if there's a subject that may rattle you a bit or upset you or get a fire in your belly, that's a good starting point. And for me, I was a little bit concerned about criticism of younger Aboriginal people by elders, and that criticism being that our kids were getting into hip hop and American culture a bit too much. And when I thought about that, I thought that's a bit unfair because, like, my dad, as a kid, he was into Chuck Berry and Little Richard, and then we got people into Charlie Pride, and then through the disco kind of era, Diana Ross, Michael Jackson, Prince, and also people into Bob Marley. So I thought, you know, you can't be too critical of our young people because elders dating back, you know, we're always being influenced by other international Black subcultures as well. So I kind of wanted to challenge that criticism. The other thing that was of concern to me was non-Indigenous interest in the commercialisation of Aboriginal foods and medicines. So understanding protocol around our plants and medicines and their uses, and that people just can't go and take these things, that was a concern to me. So I thought, how do I write a book that blends these two concerns? One about the criticism of youth, and the other about how people engage with Aboriginal plants and medicines in an ethical way. So to start that process, the first thing I did was speak to my family, because I knew that I was going to set the book in Nukunu country and having fictional Nukunu characters. And so that was important. I've written plays and other books that feature fictional Nukunu life, or things that are based on actual historic experience. And I always start by speaking to my dad, uncles, aunties, cousins, great aunties and uncles, etc., to see how they feel about what I'm exploring. So for about a year, I kind of had different discussions with Nukunu family members, and then when writing the book, I had Nukunu family members look at drafts and I discuss particular aspects. And because I was speaking about plants and medicines, I really wanted to be careful about that, because I didn't want to give away too much knowledge, and needed to speak with family about how to deal with that issue. So that was the first step for me, and I've actually published a paper on that process, looking at the protocols for producing Aboriginal literature, using Calypso Summer as a case study. So once I had blessing from family, then I started to think about the key characters. And I wanted to show a young person that was really influenced by another Black subculture. And so of all those kind of artists, like the rock and roll artists like Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Charlie Pride, Country, Diana Ross, etc., I thought, who was the most loved Black international artists? And I settled on Bob Marley. So I created a character, Calypso, and Calypso really loves reggae music. He loves Bob Marley, and he's getting into a bit of strife. He's a good young fella, quite talented, and he just wants to get work within a sports store, and instead he ends up getting work within a really new agey kind of health foods shop. And his boss, who's pretty exploitative, he asks Calypso if he can go and get some Aboriginal foods and medicines from his tribes people. And Calypso is quite shocked, and then he speaks to his mum, and she tells him to go home to the Southern Flinders and to speak with his auntie about these things. So then we start to see Calypso asking questions, and I guess with good stories, you need to have conflict and tension. So one of his cousins, Vic, he's like, who's this young Calypso fella coming along, you know, Jackie come lately, and asking these questions that are really sensitive. And Calypso doesn't really understand the sensitivity of what he's asking about. So with this book, the reader gets brought into our protocols about how we deal with each other, how we share knowledge, and which knowledge is sensitive. But yeah, I think you need a device and you need characters, or at least I do, to carry that kind of tension and to bring people into their world. So it's a really character-driven book, and I think when people read this, like talking about my work with the kids at Tiwi College, the kids there, when they read Calypso Summer, they said, "We know Calypso. He's our cousin." And I think most of us know Calypso, this character. So, I think having characters that are relevant really helps. And yeah, it just helps people to engage and to have an interest and compassion for Calypso, and we want to follow his story. And I think, good stories are about people moving from a particular point, having a particular aspiration or a dream, and then looking at their trials and triumphs as they move towards that dream. Okay, so the next question is, once you've written a manuscript, how do you get the manuscript published? With Calypso Summer, so I'd written the manuscript and I'd written various drafts, and then I approached an agent so that the agent could help represent the book. So the agent's a very, very highly regarded Australian agent, and she started sending it to a lot of the mainstream publishers. And at this time, I was teaching at the University of South Australia, and I was just about to write a course about creative writing. So a lot was resting on the publication of this novel for me. Like, I'd published other works, but this was part of my PhD, writing this book, and I was really passionate about the story. So she started sending it off to most of the major Australian publishers, and it got knocked back by all of those publishers. And that was pretty challenging for me, but I really believed in the story and what I was trying to communicate. And so then I was really fortunate to get a postdoctorate fellowship, and I had time in New Zealand to undertake research, and I spent some of that time rewriting Calypso Summer. So Calypso Summer was initially set in the 1980s, and it was set in the past, set in the past, so in the 1980s, and it was written in a third-person narrative. And while I was in New Zealand, I thought, how do I make this book more appealing? So I started to write it in first person and set it in the present so that it would have more relevance for young readers. And I had to challenge myself a bit. So why did I want to set it in the 80s? It's because I grew up in the 1980s and I loved the West Indies, and I wanted to talk about the West Indies in the 1980s and I guess what I was seeing around me. So I had quite a sense of nostalgia, but that was getting in the way of me writing a good novel that was publishable. So I rewrote the book in first person, set in the present. Later that year, I was visiting Queensland, some family, and I walked through the State Library, as I often do when I'm there, and I saw the black and white competition advertised, and I submitted my manuscript. A couple of months later, I received a call from the black and white team. I was in my office and they told me I'd won the black and white award, and yeah, I started crying. Like, it was pretty overwhelming, and yeah, I was just really proud of myself for working through a lot of drafts and not giving up on myself. Consequently, those publishers that knocked Calypso Summer back, I've worked with them since in different capacities, working on other manuscripts. providing professional development training to some of their staff. So I guess the thing is, when you're not backed by a publisher, don't take it personally. It's like every business has a particular purpose. You're not really going to take your lamb chops and try to sell them at the vegan store. So you just got to think each publisher has a particular niche and they're looking for a particular thing. So when you're sending a manuscript out, you need to think about who is the publisher, what do they publish? So do they have a specialization in children's books? Do they publish Aboriginal children's books, authored children's books, etc.? Same with autobiography. Who is publishing autobiography? Who is publishing non-fiction? So you've really got to pick your publisher. And if you can, I think getting an agent helps. My first novel, like Calypso Summer, it was published because I won an Unpublished manuscript award. So if you're a up-and-coming writer, I really recommend putting it in an Unpublished manuscript award. And the benefit is you receive payment. So for Calypso Summer, I received $10,000 in prize money, which was just incredible. And it was a big help in then helping me to take the time out to further edit the book and to start working on the follow-up novel, Songs That Sound Like Blood. So following the publication of Calypso Summer, I was really fortunate to win another award, and it's an award called the White Raven Award, and it was given by the International Youth Library. So the award is given to books of high artistic merit, deserving international attention. So it was a real honour to win that award, and again, I felt very proud of myself, given that the book had been knocked back by multiple publishers, and it took a long time to write. Like that book took five years to write. So I won that award, and then later I was approached by firstly a producer at NITV who had interest in the book and adaptation into television. And since it has been picked up by a production company, Kojo, based here in Adelaide, and they're developing it into a television series. So for me, I couldn't have asked for a better outcome, and hopefully all goes to plan with Kojo Productions and the development of the adaptation of Calypso Summer into a television series. So one of the important things about writing to know is that it takes time. And you could really try to race to write a book in a year. As I said, Calypso Summer took about 5 years from concept through to publication, maybe a little longer. And Songs That Sound Like Blood, I wrote this draft in a year, and it was published within 2 years. So I guess it depends on where you're at, but the main thing is to try to write daily. And I find that if I sit down for at least 10 minutes a day, that 10 minutes, because I love the process, like you get caught up in the writing. It should be a pleasurable experience. So if I sit down for 10 minutes, that can turn into an hour, 2 hours quite easily. But as long as you sit down for 10 days, you'll get something produced. And 6 months down the track, 12 months down the track, you can see your progress. Like anything, it takes time to write well. So you need to read back through drafts, be critical of your own writing, get other people, such as editors or people that love reading, to comment on your work. Often it's not the best idea to get your siblings or mum or dad or your friends to read your work. It has to be someone a little bit more removed, someone that can give you honest feedback. A lot of people these days, they write on a laptop or a computer. Um, when I was asked to write Songs That Sound Like Blood, and Magabala Books, yeah, said they would like a draft within a year or 18 months. I thought, wow, that's a big ask. But I thought about my first book, Sweet Guy, which I also wrote that draft in a year, and I thought, how did I actually do that? And when I wrote Sweet Guy, it was before I owned a laptop. So yeah, it wasn't the days where everyone had a computer or a laptop at home. And I wrote that book on a little notepad about this big that I bought from an art gallery. And I sat down every day and I wrote that pen to paper. And I think writing pen to paper, it's a good stream of consciousness, and also you don't kind of see the red marks come up on the computer and the errors, and you don't feel inclined to go back and correct what you've written. So I went back to that process. So I just had a notepad, and while I was traveling to work on the train, I wrote every day. And because I had a plot, so I think plotting your story is very important. Then I could see the characters were outlined, the plots, and then I could just write every day. And then I transferred, of course, what I'd written in the notepad over into a Word document. And doing that, there's kind of like an editing step. When you present work to a publisher, you want it to be as clean as possible. So you want to eliminate grammatical errors, spelling mistakes, make sure your characters are being true to their character, the plot is fully developed, and yeah, sometimes you might find that you're being a bit lazy. Like sometimes if I'm tired or I'm rushed, I get a bit lazy and I don't really communicate the full story of what I want to in a particular passage. So with that editing process of taking pen to paper into a Word document, you get to check if you're on track or not. So yeah, they're a few of the tips that I have about writing and a bit about my journey as a writer, and yeah, also particularly my journey writing Calypso Summer. Yeah, I'm really proud to be a winner of the 2013 Black and Write award. I encourage all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander writers to submit work into Black and Write. And yeah, I'm also a really proud ambassador in the Indigenous Literacy Foundation. September the 2nd is Indigenous Literacy Day. I encourage everyone to support this important initiative. It's so important that our kids, our communities have access and are involved in the creation of books for our own people that are relevant to us.